everybody. Some of a lot of our regulars are here, and some of our irregulars are, here. So anyway, I don't think I want to introduce Rabbi Linzer because he's one of these people probably that I would, underpraise, and everybody knows who he is. So take it away, Rabbi Linzer.
Thank you. I have to tell you that Norman Lamb was once introduced at some event, and he was not happy with the introduction. So he got up and he said, "Of all the introductions I've ever received in my life, this one is the most recent." Anyway, all right. So good Chodesh, everybody. Funny to say good Chodesh, but Rosh Chodesh Av. We are now entering into the lead up, to Tisha B'Av. So Bert and I were just felt that it would be a good idea to do a series of classes relating to that period. It does occur to me that the final one will be actually after Tisha B'Av, so it might be a little bit of a down or whatever. But actually no. You know what? We might rearrange it because the final one is supposed to be fasting for a pregnant woman on Tisha B'Av, and I think that needs to be before Tisha B'Av. Okay, and then we could decide on the third one. The third one is now scheduled to be a two votes from the Holocaust. But if people feel that they want some more positive, topic or whatever, uplifting one, we can change it at that time. But it's going to be three parts around Inyana Dioma, and we will start with the very issue, looking at the way in which Chazal deal with, think about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, because I think for a lot of people, when we come to Tisha B'Av, coming up to it, it's like hard to get emotionally invested in certain ways, because for the most part, how much are we sort of feeling like, oh, our life would only be so much better if there was a Beis Hamikdash? Even putting aside like the political issues of that, do we feel like the lack of having korbanot in our lives, of having a priestly class, every day working in terms of the korbanot? And I think that's why, if you just think about the programming that takes place around Tisha B'Av, it's an attempt to focus on other things or things that are, related themes. First of all, of course, part of the whole Chorban is not just the Chorban of the Beis Hamikdash. It is the terrible destruction of people and of society and of the Jewish society at that time. If you read Eicha, so much of Eicha is the human tragedy that is occurring, and how we lost sovereignty, and then it was the beginning of a whole period of exile. So I don't really hear that discussed too much in terms of the programming, but that's definitely something that is historically comes hand in hand with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. That is something that we can at least, I think, relate to more. Certainly, I think because of that dimension, it's why when later tragedies occurred, destructions of community, particularly around, around the Crusades, and kinos were written, modeled after the kinos of Eicha, and they became, Tisha B'Av became, the kinos of Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av became the day to memorialize and mourn over those destructions of Jewry that occurred in Jewish communities. One of the keynote actually says, I don't remember the exact language, but it says, because, Ein Lahosif, you can't add to, our days of commemoration, that's why we're sort of commemorating it today. And to some degree, that's like a bit of a, besides whatever formal halachic reasons there might be against establishing other days of mourning like Tisha B'Av. And I think that we have to strike a balance between the time we give towards mourning and the tragedies and celebrating, why we're, what it means to be a Jewish life nowadays, and, what Jewish life is about, and the holidays. Sometimes when it gets to be this time of year, yeah, my feeling is like, okay, fine. Finally, we have the summer. We can relax. We can go on vacation. And that's, oh, right. It's like the 9 days. We can't do any swimming. Oh, right. It's like, we're going on vacation, but one of those days we got to fast because it's Shiva Serpentamas. So, and sometimes I think we can tend to feel like there's maybe, even with the way it is, a little too much in terms of all of the mourning of the past. But certainly, okay, so we're certainly not going to have more, and Tisha B'Av becomes the day to commemorate those types of tragedies that occurred throughout history. And then, of course, the most
And so,
recent,
so
yeah,
why there was, I guess, great controversy about, uh, you know, uh, in
Yom
Israel when
HaShoah.
they Yom HaShoah.
Yeah, thank you. So that was where I was going to go next,
Oh,
because no, 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 thank you. You anticipated because so obviously the question became about Holocaust commemoration, and there's some very powerful keynote, in the what's that English one that's from England that everybody uses, the English Hebrew.
Rosenfeld.
Dakota.
Rosenfeld.
Rosenfeld. He's got a very, beautiful, I don't know if you can use that word, poignant, powerful kina on the Holocaust that he wrote. There are others that have been written. So certainly we were going to commemorate it during Tisha B'Av. There was a whole feeling about this is completely out of proportion of any tragedy, national tragedy that we have ever experienced. It's unequaled, and we cannot just fit it into the Tisha B'Av commemoration. So that became the push to have a separate day of Yom HaShoah. There was even it was even established. I'm not really prepared now to talk about Yom HaShoah. It's not where my head is, but I'll just say this as like the chapter headings. It was even established specifically during Nisan, because even though Nisan is the holiday of Pesach and of redemption and of supposed to be one that you would not want to have a mourning enter into, although we do have Sfirat HaOmer, but there was a feeling like that, the Holocaust was so a rupture within history that it was important to commemorate it specifically, like even during Nisan, like even during this day month that usually should be blocked off from it, and to have a special day. And that is what most of Jewry does. Of course, Haredim do not. Again, I don't know if things have changed in recent years, but Haredim feel, no, you don't add days, and they just have it during Tisha B'Av. The upshot of all of this, and now, by the way, I should say, there have been some powerful keynote written post-October 7th, and I can actually share them with the group. From some women in Israel have written some keynote. I don't know whether the communities will be saying it. So there is a lot to focus on in terms of Tisha B'Av, in terms of national tragedy, ways that we have suffered, ways that communities have been destroyed, and that becomes the focus of the day. And so much of the programming tends to be around Holocaust, because it's easier to find movies and other types of programming around the Holocaust, than it is around all of this other stuff. But that becomes the way we relate to Tisha B'Av. Oh, okay. So somebody just posted that Rav Rimon sent out a kina. If you could share that with, I don't know if there's a way, if people are on a group here, if there's a WhatsApp group, do you have a way to share with the group?
Why don't you? Can I suggest that Moshe send it to me, and I'll send it to everybody in the group.
That would be great.
Email it to me.
So, that has to do with, like, that is the part that is extremely human, extremely, tragic, that part of our history. And that is the part that we all can and do relate to. The part that tends to get quickly, glossed over, as I said, or that maybe we feel guilty about not relating to. I don't know if, at least that's how I sometimes feel. But you might not all have the same Jewish guilt that I do. Anyway, but it's about like the Chorban Habayis itself. How are we really feeling about the Chorban Habayis itself? And what I want to do is actually spend the rest of our time together looking at some texts about how the rabbis dealt with the Chorban Habayis, and to show the thesis is going to be that even though there were, often the message is about the profound tragedy of Chorban Habayis, obviously, and that, for example, we are always hearkening back towards not just to a rebuilt Yerushalayim, but to a rebuilt Beis Hamikdash, and we say that our tefillot are supposed to be a type of a substitute for the korbanot, that there actually is another thread within Chazal, that while Chorban HaBayis was, of course, tragic, we should not be looking backwards, but looking forwards, and that actually be seeing it as a way of creating new opportunities of religious expression. Okay, so that is what we are going to be looking at today. So before I jump in and look at some sources that I have prepared, are there any questions or comments at this stage? No, we're good? Okay, so let's take a look. Here, I'm going to open up. Okay, I made this 125%. Can people see this, or do they need it to be bigger?
Somebody bigger, please.
Bigger? Bigger. Okay. Bigger, all right. That good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So the first thing I want to look at is a series of Mishnayot and Gemarot that deal with this idea of Zecher LeMikdash, a commemoration, things we do as a commemoration to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, there's two categories which it's important to distinguish. There's one thing that the Gemara talks about, which is called Zecher LeChorban, something that we do specifically to commemorate the destruction. Can anybody think, have you heard that phrase before applied to any practice that we are doing something Zecher LeChorban?
Like when people leave a part of the home uncompleted.
Excellent. I don't know how many people do that nowadays, but you are supposed to do that. Like when you're building a house, a little part of it is not completed, Zecher LeChorban. Or people that have the practice of the ashes on on the forehead of the chassan. I don't know if people know about that practice. It's supposed to be like Zecher LeChorban. Or the breaking of the glass. Even though everybody yells Mazel Tov, now there's a new sensibility around that to not yell Mazel Tov, because it's supposed to be, even at the moments of our greatest happiness, we remember that Yerushalayim is still destroyed. That's a series of things that their specific focus was to actually focus on the fact that the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, and that is tragic, and that is something that we mourn. Then there is a whole other range of things in the Mishnayot that are called Zecher LeMikdash. You hear the difference, right? Remembering how things used to be in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And I want to look at those closely, because while the surface meaning of that is that, it is a way in which we hold on to, remembering the past and commemorating the past and the past greatness that we had at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it actually seems that there's a more, hidden goal, and something quite different gets achieved through this. So we're going to start by looking at this Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. I think Rabbi Fox might have taught this on this Mishnah and some things related to it on Rosh Hashanah itself, for those that were in the show at the time. Okay, so here's what it says. Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, Shechal Yot B'Shabbat. What happens when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos? B'Mikdash Hayu Tokim, Aval Lo B'Medina. They would blow the shofar in the Mikdash. Some say that means the Beit HaMikdash proper. Some say that means Yerushalayim, but whatever. Let's say the Mikdash proper, but not in the broader country. It was only in the Beit HaMikdash. Mishacharav Beit HaMikdash Itchin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Hu Tokim B'Kol Makom Sheish Bo Beit Din. So after it was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, let's blow it even where there is a Beit Din. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash. It's on Shabbos. Are we going to go Shabbos without hearing it? No, we'll blow the shofar in a place where there is a Beit Din. And then there's a question, is that really every Beit Din or a central Beit Din? Amar Rebbe Lazar, lo hitkin Rebbe Yochanan ben Zakkai ela b'Yavne bilvad. No, only in Yavne, where there was the central Beit Din, right? That's where the Sanhedrin moved after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Amrulo, they said back, Echad Yavne v'Echad Kol Makom Sheish Bo Beit Din. No, not just Yavne, wherever there's a Beit Din. Now, why does he want to? What is the reason for this takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to be blowing the shofar on Shabbat where there's a Beit Din? If you look at other Mishnayot, we will see that that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a series of takanot. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, of course, was the rabbinic political head at the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And he made a series of takanot, Zecher LaMikdash, which this seems to be, of course, one of them. So just to look briefly, just so you see the fact that they're being framed as Zecher LaMikdash, we're going to look at source 3, and then we'll double back. Okay, so
No, you got to move the thing up.
Oh, you can't see that? Okay, sorry.
I can't see 3.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Again, notice Mikdash Medina. Originally, the lulav was taken in the base of in the Mikdash all 7 days of Sukkot. Outside, only 1 day. Mishacharav Beit HaMikdash, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Hitin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lulav nitab b'Medina shiva. That it would actually, we would take it all 7 days outside the Beit HaMikdash, which is what we do. Zecher LeMikdash. Okay, so that's the key phrase, Zecher LeMikdash. And there's more and more takanot, which we'll get to, all that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made that were, Zecher LeMikdash. Okay, so that's the takana he's making. Blow the shofar, there's no longer a Beis HaMikdash, it's Shabbos. How do we remember the Beis HaMikdash? We remember the Beis HaMikdash by blowing it in a Beit Din, where there's a Beit Din, maybe where there's the central Beit Din of Yavne. So again, on the face of it, this is a way we commemorate and we turn our thoughts to the Beit HaMikdash and to be thinking about, remembering how things used to be at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. That's presumably how Zecher LeMikdash is normally understood.
What does the association with Beis Din have to do with it?
Well, because Beit Din, I'll get to that, right? Meaning, why Yavne, why Beit Din, why specifically those? Okay, excellent. Hold that question. Hold that thought. Let's take a look at a little story the Gemara tells about what happened when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was making this takana. Okay, it did not go over without debate. Tanu Rabbanan, I'm on source number 2 now. Pamachat Chav Rosh Hashanah liyot b'Shabbat. 1 year, Rosh Hashanah, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbat. Vayu kol ha'arim mitkansin. All the villages were gathering. People came to Yerushalayim in the immediate proximate villages because they wanted to hear the shofar blown. They were used to hearing the shofar blown, in the Beit HaMikdash, even on Shabbat. Amar lehem Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai libnei B'Teira. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to B'nai B'Teira. Now, B'nai B'Teira, we know from other sources, was like a family of, of prestige and of influence and of power, in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, so they were like the old, not elite. What's the word? The old guard, or the, but the, anyway, the leadership from when there was a Beit HaMikdash, at least within the Beit HaMikdash. So he said, Nitka. You know what? Let's blow the shofar. Everybody is here. The people are clamoring. Let's blow the shofar, even though we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Amrulo Nadun. They said, no. Let's have a discussion first. Okay? Well, we're not ready. We have to deliberate on it. Amar Lahem. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a very good politician. Amar Lahem Nitkav V'Achar Nadun. He said, look, people are clamoring. We don't have the patience right now for a discussion. Let's just give them what they want. Let's blow the shofar, and then we can deliberate whether we should be doing this practice, regularly or not. So they listened to him. La'achar shetaku, after they blew the shofar, Amrulo, they said to him, Nadun, okay, fine, now let's have the discussion. Amar lahem, he said to them, for nishma'a keren b'Yavne, the shofar has already been heard in Yavne. Oh, I said they were gathering in Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, it seems that they naturally came to Yavne. That's important. We'll have to go back to that. He said, no, look, the blast has already been heard. The proclamation has already been made. And we've already set a precedent. Too late. Precedent has been set. Okay, very good. Different type of leadership. It's not necessarily a let's get everybody behind it and discuss it and have a conversation. You do it, establish a precedent. Now it's established. So very smart politically. Yes.
How did it? The Arisa, it just seems to be that it is that you're supposed to blow shofar any place.
Right.
Because, in other words, how did it become associated only with the Beis Hamikdash,
Right.
as opposed to the broader use of it all over?
Okay, so that's a good question. I'll give you a very short answer. The Yerushalmi makes it sound like not blowing a shofar on Shabbat is a deoraita, because the Torah says, zichron truah, that there's a day where it's only a remembrance of truah. At the same time, in the Beit HaMikdash, where the idea of shofar blast or whatever are more closely connected to korbanot, at least the chatzotzrot, and the psukim around the musaf are about yom truah and so on. There was an understanding that it was a division that way, but it was some deoraita about that there are days it's only a remembrance, but in the Beit HaMikdash, where the essence of the day, by the bringing of the korbanot, of musaf and so on, was being expressed, that you had the blowing of the shofar itself. The Bavli's way of understanding it, which is the more common way, because the Bavli dominates our understanding, was that it was a gzeira that you would come to carry the shofar on Shabbat, and they were not afraid in the Beit HaMikdash, where there was, the Kohanim and oversight and so on, and the Kohanim were the ones entrusted with blowing it. They weren't afraid for it to be that people would come to carry. You go to one place, you're not blowing on your own. If you're blowing on your own, you'll come to carry. There's only one place it happens, and that place, it's within walls, the Beit HaMikdash, whatever. They know what they're doing, and that's why we would do it. So that was the issue. All right, we'll get to that when we talk about why Yavne served as a substitute. But first, let's talk about what this whole debate was about. To follow up with Bert, question, if the issue was, are we afraid that people are going to carry the shofar if we do it in Yavne, and can that allay our fears, violation of Shabbat, and are we comfortable with doing it in Yavne the same way we were comfortable in doing it in the Beit HaMikdash? It doesn't sound like that's what's going on, that there was some technical question of should we be concerned about carrying. It sounds like there was a much bigger issue at stake here, right? It sounds like there was a real concern. What do you think, now that I've also told you that B'nai B'Tera were people that were heavily involved in the Beit HaMikdash, what do you think would be their reason to be opposing it?
They'll lose their status.
Right. Let's think politically, okay? Or even if they don't lose their status, it's like, okay, there's no Beit HaMikdash right now, but we still represent the leadership of the Beit HaMikdash. What's going to happen if you blow it in Yavne? What's that going to message to the people? What's the message going to be? How are the people going to hear that? There's no Beit HaMikdash. We blew it in Yavne. So the message is that what? Last year, you went to the Beis HaMikdash to hear the shofar blown. Or 5 years ago, when Rosh Hashanah fell out on Shabbos, and there was a Beis HaMikdash, the only place the shofar was blown was in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? Now, Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. It's 5 years later. Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos again. They're blowing the shofar in Yavne. What's the message?
Yavne is replacing the Beit HaMikdash.
Thank you. Yavne is the replacement of the Beit HaMikdash. Yes.
And even replacing the importance of Yerushalayim.
Right, and Yavne is a different city too. We're decentralizing Beit HaMikdash, decentralizing Yerushalayim. Now you understand why the B'nai B'Tera said, whoa, you're not going to come ahead and usurp the status of the Beit HaMikdash, usurp the status, of Yerushalayim. No. We have to talk about this, okay? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, no, we're going to do it, and he did it. And the idea for Nishma Keren B'Yavne, the idea of Nishma Keren, the horn has been heard, sort of is also like an idea, the proclamation has gone out from Yavne, which that whole image is an image of Yavne being a central place, that the proclamation teaching has gone out from there. And it is establishing Yavne as the new center after the Chorban Habayis. So, and that is really what was going on here. And that is, here is my contention, that is when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai makes takanot zecher lemikdash, there's really something stealth going on there. On the surface, it's like, oh, by doing this, we'll remember the way things used to be at the time of the Beis HaMikdash. But sometimes I tell my students or teachers or whatever, when you're about to say something, framing is key. If you don't get up and say, let us now blow the shofar to remember how they used to blow the shofar in the Beis HaMikdash. If you said that, that's the way I would understand it. But if you don't say that, and you just blow the shofar in Yavne like you used to blow it in the Beis HaMikdash, the message is, this is taking the place of the Beis HaMikdash. This is now playing the role that the Beis HaMikdash used to play. So the Zecher LeMikdash is things that are practices that I think ostensibly, I wrote an article on this. I've never seen anybody else that made this point, but it's so true. Ostensibly, we're doing it to remember the way things were, but because we are not framing it and we're just doing it, what it's really doing is creating new realities now post the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, and what happens is that after the Beit HaMikdash, in a way, Judaism becomes decentralized. It's true, Yavne was the center of the seat of like rabbinic activity, but there were also, many other, Torah was being taught in many, many places. Torah replaces the Beit HaMikdash. I'll get back to that. Judaism became much more decentralized. And in a way, the Beit HaMikdash, you lose the centrality, and there's power in a central place, but you also can lead to a proliferation of new opportunities, geographically, otherwise, and so on. So the question that was being asked here, was it only in every Beit Din or only in Yavne, was part of that question. Is are we shifting it from Mikdash to Yavne, but one central place? Or are we saying, no, now it's also decentralized and there are many opportunities, many Batei Dinim in which you can blow it. Now let's talk about what Beit Din is about. So Beit Din, on the one hand, is a place of you go to adjudicate disputes. It's a court, fine. But what else Beit Din can also represents something else. If Kohanim represent, and the Mikdash represents, sort of like Mikdash-centered, Korbanot, Kohanim, what types of things go along with Beit Din? Like what type of world is that part of? It's not Kohanim, right? Who are the people that matter in a Beit Din? Right? The
Dayanim.
The Dayanim who are, right, it's the world of, and what are you judging? You're judging Torah law. Beit Din represents Torah and rabbis and the rabbinic sort of, center, right? I mean, there's a Beit Midrash, it's true, but the Beit Midrash is where you're studying it. Rabbinic power, if you would, is where the judgment. Beit Din is Torah and rabbinic center. So that's why Yavne was the big rabbinic center. Yavne was right. That's where they collected all the rabbis came and everybody came and talked about the Torah traditions. And that was sort of the center of rabbinic Torah activity after the destruction. But any Beit Din is sort of a representative of that. So what you are messaging here is that with the Chorban Habayis, Torah takes the place of the Beit HaMikdash. And not only is Torah taking the place and we have a centralized Torah authority, there's even a sense, there's even opinions that we actually, we do. It becomes decentralized and Torah is spread all over. And that might even create multiple opportunities for blowing the shofar. Now, maybe not. There are concerns. Sometimes, even in a Torah world, maybe you want there to be one main place and you want to focus on the center. Maybe we're afraid people will carry you. Who knows what we're afraid of? But that is what is happening here. That is the huge shift. That the Chorban Abayis, we are going to do things Zeichel HaMikdash, but what they're really going to accomplish is expanding Torah opportunities, shifting and expanding. So let's talk about two others of his takanot and see how that plays out. So we've already read source number 3, taking the lulav all 7 days outside of the Beis HaMikdash. I have a question for you. When you take the lulav, over Sukkot, and you take it for all of Sukkot, by a show of hands, how many people have ever thought, not ever, but I know, but I think when they're taking the lulav on all the other days after the first day, that they're doing this Zecher LaMikdash? Anybody think about that? Does that occur to anybody? No. Okay. Actually,
The only thing is when I don't, but the only thing is when they do Hoshanas.
Excellent. Gabert, once again, you're ahead of me. I was going to get there, okay? If I had to point to something that was Zeichel HaMikdash, it would be the Hoshanas, okay? And we'll get back to that in a minute. Most people, or many people, assume that even Doraita, the Torah mitzvah, is all 7 days. So there'd be so many people that would be shocked to hear, what, on the other days it's only rabbinic? Okay? So what has this done? Under the banner of Zeichel HaMikdash, nobody is thinking about the Beit HaMikdash. And what we actually have done is we've expanded religious practice. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash, you only took the lulav for 1 day. And the only place that you had expansive practice was the Beis HaMikdash. Now there's no Beis HaMikdash. Everybody gets to do it for all 7 days. Our practice expands. Okay, so again, ostensibly we're remembering the Beis HaMikdash, but what really has happened is it has created new opportunities. Now, Bert says, but Hoshanos, correct, and that is not the takanas of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Hoshana, is something that is very much, you do something, first of all, that has not based on anything in the Torah. You're walking around a bima, you're like, what? It makes no sense. So that's something that why are we doing this, right? I'm sure everybody knows the old corny joke, like, somebody sees these Jews walking around and doing their Hoshanas and doesn't understand what it is. And he says to his friend, do you know what they're doing? He says, I don't know. All I hear them saying is, I don't know. How should I know? So anyway, so we're told, you know what this is? This is Zeichel HaMikdash. All right? But the lulav.
They in fact did that in the Beis HaMikdash?
What?
They in fact did that in the Beis HaMikdash?
Well, they did it just with the ravas, not with the lulav. But yes, they did do that. But with the lulav, we are taking a mitzvah in the Torah and expanding it. And there is not a scintilla of reason why it should evoke in us a possibility that this is remembering the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so there are things that are done that effectively achieve, this is how it was done. But the takanas of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that were at the moment after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, he had a choice. What is Judaism going to look like now? Are we going to still think about the center of a Beis HaMikdash and that we are living in just a, class B Jewish observance? Or are we going to embrace, with all of the tragedy, are we going to embrace the new opportunities that it gives us and shift from Beit HaMikdash to Torah and shift from a centralized observance, to a more expanded, decentralized? And he had the foresight to realize if we're to succeed in the next, centuries and millennia, there needs to be something, we can't be backwards looking, we have to be forwards looking. And that was the brilliance of these things that were Zeichel HaMikdash. I want to do one more. You know what? Let's not. That's a little bit more technical about accepting witnesses, but it basically works the same way. Now, I want to say the following before we get to this. So if you think about the holidays, right? What do we do? What Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takanot? We have Rosh Hashanah, okay, so that he did, and now more expansive. Yom Kippur, okay, there's nothing really to do because Yom Kippur, to the degree that it's other than fasting, it's the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, and he did not bother to do anything because that was all about the avoda. So that would have turned us backwards. Sukkot, okay, let's expand and do the Sukkot and Lulav 7 days. Great, that's expanding opportunities. Then you come to Pesach. Now, Pesach is very interesting because if there's one place that we could be thinking about Zecher Lemikdash, it's the absence of the Korban Pesach, okay? But he did not make a takana there. There was nothing that he said we should be doing about Pesach, Zecher Lemikdash. Even though that was the Chag where we are most likely or most primed to be thinking about the absence of the Beit HaMikdash. And I could elaborate there about the ways the Haggadah is structured, and there are two different opinions there, how much we should be thinking about the Korban Pesach. It's a much larger shiur when it's around Pesach. But what's clear is he did not make a takana there. And Shavuos also, nothing that happens outside the Beit HaMikdash, so he did not make Zecher LaMikdash. He only made, here's the irony, he only made Zecher LaMikdash for the things that were not about the Beit HaMikdash, that the practice of them would actually turn us away from the Beit HaMikdash. But the things that we had lost that were very Mikdash centered, and their observance would have turned us to the Beit HaMikdash, the Avodah on Yom Kippur, the Korban Pesach, who knows, the Korban on Shavuot, those things he did not do anything Zecher LaMikdash. So what you really see is this brilliance of, yes, pay respect for the Korban Abayis, and within that, let's focus on the future. All right, so I want to, as part of that, look at some stories, two stories that sort of concretize this, but I'll pause for a moment and just take any questions that we might have.
Although
Yeah, well,
you
that's
said-
Judy. Judy has her hand up. Yes, Judy.
Although you said we're going to defer Pesach, I can't help but remember when we're at the Seder, we talk about the Zecher LeMikdash Gehillel, the Hillel
Right.
sandwich.
Right. So that was not, I'm not saying we never do that, okay? But I'm like, we also do the Hoshanas,
Right.
But Yochanan ben Zakkai was not interested in doing that. He did not want to point us backwards, okay? And for the most part, right, anyway, it's a longer discussion around Pesach, but you see two sort of strands within the rabbinic thought about how much, or practice, about how much to make the Seder after the Korban, how much to sort of have a Korban Pesach focus, and how much to just move away as much as possible from the Korban Pesach. Okay, but you are right. There are some small elements that are there, but I'm not saying Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the only approach, but he was very focused on moving us forward and not having us look backwards. Okay, yes, Bernie.
So after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash,
Yeah,
people were exiled, and there were no such takanot.
right.
And there was a yearning to come back and build a Beit HaMikdash. So
Right.
can we say that the takanot of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in essence, changed that yearning and precluded this kind of yearning from coming back and rebuilding?
Such a good question, and it's always, because the end of your question could have ended two ways, right? What was the other way the question could have ended? Is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takanot and a evidence that there was not that yearning, and right? So, how much certain things, are they reinforcing something that's already there or expressing, or are they redirecting? So I think it's a good point. I think you are right. I think that he was basically, look, I would totally agree, after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, you were living in a world in which, I think, Torah had not become a central part of the Jewish expression yet, in terms of like the rabbinic Torah learning and so on. I mean, obviously, mitzvot, yes, but not like the world of Torah learning. It had not become a central part. And korbanot were still very much taken for granted as the only sort of form of religious worship. And just politically, the reality was that there seemed to be opportunity to be going back and to rebuild it. And lo and behold, a short 70 years later, right? I mean, I don't know if they realized at the time, but the reality of, of the time was that, there that possibility was there. So I think that is correct. I think Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had the vision to realize that I don't think it's like everybody was focused. You already had begun the rabbinic enterprise in a serious way, right? Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai, maybe it's early, but the rabbinic enterprise had begun in a serious way. And he was also, I think, reading the tea leaves of the political, historical reality, and and recognizing that it was not going to be helpful to look backwards. So to answer your question, I think that if what you're saying is, if it hadn't been for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, could we, would that have led to going back and building a third Beis HaMikdash? I don't know if that was your question, but I'm going to say that my answer would be absolutely not. That was not on the table. Now, nobody has a crystal ball, but he was smart enough to realize that wasn't on the table. And he said, okay, some people are maybe people don't know which way to look. Some people are looking backwards. That's the natural thing to do. I got to help them move forwards, so I would agree, I think that was his vision. He was visionary enough to realize that was the leadership that was needed. I will tell you in an interesting way the Navi predicted, thank you, for a return. It's also an excellent point, right? Which there was a Nevuah return as well in the first Beit HaMikdash. I will also add that people aren't aware of this, but in the 3rd century, I think it was, there was a Roman emperor, 4th century maybe, who gave the Jews permission to go back and to rebuild the temple. And actually work had begun on the rebuilding of a 3rd temple. And then he was killed, and it stopped, and so on. But we only know this from the historical record. There is not a scintilla of a hint of this in any of the rabbinic literature, which is a really fascinating point about how much are we really trying to go back, But there always had been these two strands. So you're right, not just two strands amongst the rabbis, I'm sure amongst the people as well. So that issue of which way were the people going is actually perfect for looking at, I think at looking at let me see if there's a, okay, maybe not. Okay, but let's take a look at these two approaches in two stories, okay? The first one is a perfect, what we just said was a perfect segue to this story in Gittin, the story about the destruction of the temple. So this has a way which, they were under siege, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was smuggled out, and now he's having an encounter with Vespasian. So Amar Lei. So then Vespasian heard that he was being called back to become emperor. So he said to him, Mezel al-Thilna, I'm going to go back and be emperor. And I'm going to send somebody else to be the general, Titus. Okay. Ask for me one thing. I don't want to go into the Gemara beforehand why he was willing to offer something, but Vespasian said, ask for me one thing and I'll give it to you. Amarle, he said to him, allow me to establish Yavne and its sages as a central place of Torah, essentially. That is the one thing he asked. The Beis HaMikdash is about to be destroyed. He saw that coming. Said, the one thing I got to ask is how are we now moving forward? What are we doing now? Torah. That's what I got to ask. Help me establish a Torah center in Yavne. So, Karyale Rabbi Yosef, Itema Rabbi Akiva. So, Rabbi Yosef and some say Rabbi Akiva were not happy with this response. Meshiv Chachamim Achor V'datam Yisakel. God turns the sages backwards, and he makes their knowledge foolish. So here was this great leader, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He wasted his opportunity. He should have said, stop the siege. You're asking me one thing? One thing is stop the siege. Who savar, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai held, Dilma kule lo avid. No, that much he's not going to do. Ve'atzala porta nami lo have. And I won't even get a small degree of salvation. Something, nothing will be accomplished. So you always have, like, when you have the forces of history are so aligned and moving in this direction. You got the whole Roman Empire, right? So, and they're all moving to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. How much are you like, let's try to hold on? Oh, here's an opportunity. Let's try to hold on. Or are you like, hey, let's figure out what we can do to move forward, right? And that was, again, the vision of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So now I want to see this great story here that has a end that you might not be familiar with, or a different version of it. So remember, the one who actually was not happy with him was Rav Yosef, and some say Rabbi Akiva. Now, what do we know about Rabbi Akiva and whether he was forward-looking or backwards-looking? What do you know about Rabbi Akiva and who did Rabbi Akiva back politically? Do people know? Right? He was a backer of, anyone know? In terms of Jewish leaders.
Bar Kokhba.
Bar Kokhba, the revolt. Rabbi Akiva was totally, let's reestablish our independence. He was not willing to make peace with it. Even though he was the greatest Torah scholar, right? He said, we got to get back Bar Kokhba. He's the Mashiach. That's the direction I'm looking at. Okay, let's take a look here at the following story. Shuv Pamachat, one time, this is in Makot. Hayu olim li Yerushalayim. They, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva, they were going to Yerushalayim. Kivin shehigiu Har HaTzofim, when they came to, Mount Scopus, where you can see Yerushalayim from there. Karu bigdeihem, they rended their garments. Kivin shehigiu Har HaBayis, then they got to the Temple Mount. Ra'u sheyotzami beit kachekachim. I assume you're all, or almost all, everybody's familiar with this. They saw a fox coming out from where the Holy of Holies used to be. They began to cry, but Rabbi Akiva started to laugh. Why are you laughing? Why are you crying? Where it says, the foreigner who draws near will die. Quoting from Eicha, now foxes are going there. How can we not cry over this tremendous tragedy? That's why I'm laughing. And this is just a short version. One prophet prophesied that Zion, Jerusalem would be plowed over. And another prophet said, that we will have a restoration, okay, of Jerusalem being rebuilt. When Uriah's vision had not yet been fulfilled, I was concerned that, Zechariah's would not be fulfilled. Now I see the prophecy of destruction. I can have the same confidence that the prophecy of rebuilding will also take place. So, you have consoled us. So here are 2 of 3 possible responses. One response is we are just totally absorbed with looking in the backwards. We are totally immersed in our suffering over the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and we really cannot look forward at all. We're just going to look backwards. There's a story that said that when the Beit HaMikdash, going back to the point that was made before, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, there were people that didn't want to eat meat and didn't want to drink wine for their whole lives, not just for the 9 days, and they were like so absorbed in it. And then the answer was, you have to have proper balance. So it'll just be, for a certain period of time, we won't eat meat and drink wine, but the rest, you can't live your whole life, suffer, in sorrow. But there's definitely one approach that is primarily turned backwards, okay? Rabbi Akiva is a forward-looking approach. But it is a forward-looking approach of restoration. It's a forward-looking approach of getting back to our previous glory, right? And, Rabbi Akiva was very, had messianic. It's a very much that's always looking towards Mashiach and towards a future time of getting back to our previous glory. I'm not focusing, I have hope, right? Rabbi Akiva had hope in the faith in the face of the absurd, okay, in the face of tragedy. So he had hope, he had faith, right? It was a forward-looking, I believe we can't live our lives in sorrow. We have to live our lives with hope and belief in the future. But ultimately, the future was when we were going to restore our previous glory. Right now, okay, things are bad, right? Right now, things are bad, but we have to have faith. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has a third approach. And here's how this story is told in Avos to Rebbe Nassan, which is a work from the period of the Tanaim. Pamachat, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Yatzam Yerushalayim. Different characters. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was leaving Yerushalayim. Vaya Rabbi Yeshua holech acharav. And Rabbi Yeshua was following. V'rab Beis HaMikdash shacharav. And they saw the destroyed Beis HaMikdash. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Oy lanu al zeh shu charev. Woe to us that this is destroyed. Makom shebechaprim ba'avonosem shel Yisrael. The place where the sins of Israel were atoned for. We no longer have this atonement. Amalei. B'ni, al yirah lecha. He said, don't let this be evil in your eyes. Al yirah lecha. I mean, let's just stop for that for a second before we even get on to anything else. Don't let it be bad in your eyes. Okay? The Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. You should not treat this as something bad. I mean, that's crazy. That is the literal interpretation of that. I mean, it's interpreted here as do not be distraught. But it should not be bad for you. Okay? Maybe you shouldn't be so upset about it. Yesh lanu akapara acheres shehi kimota. We have another way of achieving atonement that is similar to it. The Eza, what is that? Zog milot chasadim. It's doing acts of kindness. Kindness. Shenemar ki chesed chafatzti v'lo zavach. What I desire is kindness, not sacrifices. Shekein matzinu b'Daniel. Each Chamudot talking about the period between the two Batei Mikdash. Shayim mitasek b'milut chasadim. He would do all these acts of loving kindness. Sacrifices, I don't know how that's gemilut chasadim. Could he bring that in Babylonia? But obviously you can't. Ella, skipping to the next paragraph. Mind gemilut chasadim shayim mitasek b'hem. Haya mitaken et hakala umesamcha umelavet hamet. He would do all these acts of taking it. How do we know this? I don't know. We're just asserting it. Okay? But he would do all of these acts of, for the bride and for the mourner. And he would pray 3 times. And his prayer would be accepted with, desire. So, what is he saying? He is not saying, don't worry, we have tefillah, and tefillah works is keneged hakorbanot. Tefillah is a substitute for the korbanot. He does not say that, because if you say that, that still means you're not doing the real thing. You're just the substitute teacher, okay? That you're just the substitute korban. He does not say that. He doesn't say we have tefillah is a kapara that is in its stead, right? He said yeshanu kapara shehi kamota. It is just like it. It is a parallel. You've got one form of kapara called korbanot. There's another form of kapara having nothing to do with korbanot called tefillah. And then look at the pasuk. And not only tefillah, he also starts with chesed. Ki chesed chafatzti below zavach. I don't want sacrifices. So he is making a point. We have ways of religious practice that not are substitute to korbanot, but are just as good, if not better. Chesed chafatzti v'lo zavach. And even when he says he would pray 3 times, right? He does not say 3 times keneged the korbanot, and he says mitkabelet biratzon. Now, if you know about the language, the Torah that uses, right, the korban, the idea of ritzui, yeratzeh, ratzon, it's what we say in ritzeh, is about korbanot. But he is using the language of korbanot directly on tefillah, not as a substitute. Okay? So he is saying a third answer is not Yes, don't look backwards, look forwards. Let's have hope for a future restoration. That's the Rabbi Akiva answer. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's answer is, Al Yirah Lecha. Don't look backwards, okay? Look forwards. We have other forms of religious practice that are just as good. Okay? If somebody said this nowadays, you would say they're not an Orthodox rabbi that to say such a thing. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says other forms that are just as good with a subtext that they might even be better. Okay? Chesed chafatzti v'lo zava. Now, I want to just end with the final thought. He does not mention here Torah. Why do you think the chesed and tefillah are, if we're thinking about leadership, the future of Yiddishkeit, after the Chorban Abayis, what does chesed and tefillah have? In what way are they more sort of expansive? Or they, would that be a thing to talk about rather than we have Torah? In terms of who, any thoughts about that? Who the audience is? Who are the people that are most...
Anybody can do it, and anywhere.
Yavne is Tanuli Yavne V'chachameha. Okay? So there's an elitism to Torah. Now, of course, everybody could learn Torah at their level. The beauty of the Torah, not like the Beit HaMikdash, is that it's available to everybody in all places at all times. But nevertheless, it's not as accessible to the wide population. There is always this elitism within Torah. Tefillah and chesed is daily types of religious practice that everybody can do. And these are the things that now, for everyone, stands in, I was about to say in the place of, I caught myself, this is for everyone now, a form of religious practice that is even better, or at least as good as that of the Beit HaMikdash. So that is, I think, the brilliance of the leadership of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It's not often the message we get, certainly not around this time. So maybe I should have saved this to the shiur after Tisha B'Av, because that's such a positive way. All right, whatever. Didn't think that one out in advance. But anyway, at least it should make you feel better if you, like me, sometimes feel guilty that we don't mourn enough for the Beit HaMikdash, that there actually was a very different type of approach within the rabbis. So of course we mourn for the destruction of, the Jewish community and autonomy in Israel and, all of the Jewish communities and all of that. But to have wondering how much we should be sort of, looking backwards to the Beit HaMikdash or not. Now, of course, 1 day a year or 2 days a year, whatever, the days of the miners' fast, I'm not saying that you have to embrace Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's approach at all times. He was talking about what's the fundamental thrust that we have to be giving for the Jewish people now that there's no Beit HaMikdash. Right? Obviously, within that, you can have Zecher LeMikdash in terms of the ashes or, the non-finishing of your house. You can have the Hoshanas. You can actually mourn the Beis HaMikdash on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and on Tisha B'Av. But in terms of the overall thrust, right, that he says has to be elsewhere. So that's where we will end for now, and to be continued next Monday. And I'll see you all then.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Huh?
You should call